The wind rolled softly over the rooftops of Raveland City, stirring the dust of cracked pavement and sun-bleached banners that hung between the weather-worn towers. The air had a taste to it, dry, electric, filled with the kind of tension that could only mean change. Not war. Not yet. But something was coming. Something that pressed against the walls of the world, like a storm gathering. On the other side of the sky, below that wind, down where the city still breathed and remembered, Cade Marlowe stood with his hands in his jacket pockets, staring out across the edge of the southern ridge. The view was clear that day, clearer than most. He could see all the way to the training yards of IRONREACH Base. Rows of troopers in uniform moved like clockwork pieces. Drones hovered silently above them. Officers shouted commands, and boots hit dirt in perfect synchronicity. Even from a distance, it felt organized, controlled, powerful, and still, it felt distant. He wasn't one of them. Not yet. Not officially. But tomorrow, he would be. Tomorrow, he would leave this place, this city of rusted memories and sun-baked dreams, and swear himself to something larger than a name or a bloodline. He would become a soldier. Another ember tossed into the fire. He didn't feel ready. He wasn't sure anyone ever did. Behind him, a pair of old rails groaned under the weight of a civilian mag car, dragging supplies and people from the city center toward the outer district. Sparks flared as it passed. Cade didn't turn to look. He'd seen it 1,000 times. He just stared into the horizon, jaw tight, eyes searching. Not for answers, for resolve. His boots crunched softly on the gravel path. As he made his way back into the heart of the city, the streets of Raveland weren't dangerous. Not like some sectors, but they were tired. Tired in the way people get when they've been left behind. The concrete was faded. The vending units flickered. The signs still played pre-recorded propaganda from years ago, talking about IRONREACH expansion and off-world settlements. No one listened anymore. He passed the old academy, where kids still trained for the entrance exam. They didn't know what waited on the other side. They still believed in medals and glory. He envied them. He passed a market stall where a vendor was trying to sell salvaged armor plating. A couple of veterans lingered nearby, watching him as he walked by, eyes sharp, measuring. One of them wore half a uniform and a synthetic leg. Cade didn't look away. He gave them a nod. The older of the two returned it. It was enough. Back at home, if it could be called that, Cade sat on the edge of a rusted bunk and looked around the room he'd grown up in. The walls were bare. The desk was clean. Everything had been packed away. Only a few items remained. A photo of his parents, taken before they left for one of the early colony fleets. A data chip containing his childhood journal. And his enlistment papers, now folded and marked with IRONREACH's seal. The evening sun spilled in through the blinds, painting everything gold and red. He reached down and pulled the duffel bag closer. His fingers hovered over the zipper. Then he heard the knock. 3 raps. Firm. Familiar. Doors open, he called. The door creaked open and Talon stepped in, taller than him, built like a blade, and always carrying the weight of 5 people on her shoulders. She wore the gray fatigues of the base, even off-duty. Her expression was unreadable. You ready? She asked. Almost. You don't get to almost your way through the oath, Cade. He gave her a look. I'm aware. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. I brought this. She handed him a small black box. Inside, a pin, a flame, wrapped in the wings of a phoenix. IRONREACH insignia. Figured you'd want the real thing, not the one they hand out after. He looked at it for a long time. Thanks. You earned it, she said, even if you don't feel like it. He slipped the pin into his pocket and zipped the duffel shut. The walk to the base was silent. The kind of silence that doesn't ask questions. It just walks beside you, patient and calm. Like an old friend who knows when words would only get in the way. Raveland passed by in fading gold light. Children ran between buildings. Vendors shut their stalls. One by one, the lights came on. And far in the distance, the Liberty rose, a massive, orbital carrier, hanging just beyond the upper stratosphere, partially visible through the thinning cloud layer. Its shape cast a long shadow across the land. That would be his next sky. The main gates of IRONREACH Base loomed like a mouth waiting to swallow the future. Cade stopped just outside the checkpoint. Talon stepped in front of him. This is it. I know. Once you take the oath, there's no going back. He didn't hesitate. I'm not here to go back. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. He stepped through the gate. The intake officers were clinical. Efficient. Name. Identification. Gene's signature scan. Medical review. Neural mapping. Everything about the process was designed to strip identity, to erase hesitation. You were a number now. A function. A part of the machine. But Cade never let go of that flame. Not even when they shaved his hair. Not even when they burned the old ID chip. Not even when they stamped his body with a biometric serial. He remembered the wind. He remembered the ridge. He remembered the look in Talon's eyes. The barracks were quiet that night. Dozens of new recruits lay in their bunks, pretending to sleep. Most didn't. Some whispered. Some cried. Some stared at the ceiling like it held answers. Cade closed his eyes and saw fire. Not flames. Not war. Something older. Something waiting. Morning came like thunder. The alarms shrieked. The lights blazed. The first drill started before most had even found their boots. Cade moved on instinct. Faster than most. Sharper. Focused. Talon watched from the command balcony, arms folded. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. By noon, half the recruits had blisters. The other half had bruises. By evening, one had already dropped. By nightfall, 2 more were gone. And Cade was still standing. But it wasn't strength that carried him. It was a question. Not what if I fail. Not what happens next. But why am I still here? Because somewhere deep inside, under the blood and pressure and noise, something new. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. March of cinders. Boots slammed into dust. Uniforms clung to sweat-soaked skin. And through it all, through the screaming wind and the sunlit fury of the Iron Reach. Training gauntlet. Cade Marlowe did not stop. He ran. He climbed. He fought. He bled. And still, he moved forward. Every grunt, every breath, every heartbeat was a defiance. A refusal. He would not break here. Not like the others. The gauntlet, as the drill instructors called it, wasn't just a test. It was a ritual. 48 hours. No sleep. Minimal rations. Endless pain. Physical trials gave way to endurance runs. Weapon drills, close-quarters sparring, and psychological exposure chambers designed to trigger trauma, hallucinations, and synthetic adrenaline loops. By the end of day 2, most of the recruits were broken. Vessels, shells of wide-eyed resolve cracked by design. But not Cade. He had learned long ago how to suffer in silence. Not because he wanted to, because he had to. Near the end of the second night, under the pale light of Ravelin's twin moons, Cade sat alone in the dirt beside a dead calm tower, chest rising and falling like a man who had outpaced death for a while but knew it would catch up eventually. His hands were scraped raw, his boots were falling apart, and his thoughts drifted, not to home, not to warmth, but to fire, to something he couldn't name, something whispering just behind his heartbeat. "You're too quiet." The voice came from his right. He looked up and saw Riker, one of the few recruits who hadn't washed out yet. Taller than Cade, bulkier, smiled too much, talked too often, but he fought like hell and kept getting up. Cade gave him a nod, too tired to fake conversation. "You've got that haunted look," Riker continued, lowering himself beside him. "You one of those tragic backstory types." Cade's expression didn't change. Riker shrugged. Figured. Silence again. Then, quieter. "You hear the rumors?" Cade glanced sideways. "About what?" Riker lowered his voice. "About what's coming." Cade waited. "They say IRONREACH intercepted something. Vorik signal patterns. Real ones. Not drills. Not simulations. The kind that make command sweat." Cade looked away, back to the dirt. "Those rumors." Riker nodded. "They started 2 weeks ago. The third morning of the gauntlet began with fire. No warning. No horn. Just fire. A flash of white plasma tore across the northern sky, followed by a low, distant boom. Everyone froze. Even the instructors. And then, sirens. Within minutes, the entire training yard was on lockdown. The instructors vanished. The barracks were sealed. Gunships rose into the air like steel hawks, forming defensive formations above the base. The recruits were herded into the hollow, a massive underground hall built as both panic shelter and disciplinary chamber. Cold concrete. No windows. A dozen thick steel doors. Cade stood near the edge of the crowd, still catching his breath from the last drill. Riker was beside him. Talon arrived minutes later, flanked by 2 armored guards. She said nothing at first, just scanned them. And when she finally spoke, her voice was harder than the walls around them. This is not a simulation. The room fell deathly still. An unauthorized object broke orbit less than 20 minutes ago. It descended toward the Barren Ridge zone, approximately 80 kilometers from this facility. It is now confirmed to be Vorik. Gasps. Whispers. One recruit dropped to their knees. Another backed into the wall like he could disappear inside it. Talon ignored them. We are not launching a full response. This is not an open war. But IRONREACH Command has authorized a live deployment. Recovery op near the impact site. Cade's eyes sharpened. That wasn't standard. Recruits never saw the field before graduation. You will not engage, Talon continued. You will observe, assist, learn. You are here to witness the shape of the enemy. Riker muttered. That's not a mission. That's a funeral. Within the hour, Cade and the other top-performing recruits were loaded onto Phoenix-class personnel carriers, heavy, atmospheric transports with reinforced plating and turret mounts. The bay doors sealed behind them, drowning them in darkness and red status lights. Cade sat in silence. Across from him, Talon stood with one hand gripping the overhead rail. She didn't wear the mask of command anymore. She wore war. The Phoenix skimmed low over the wastelands beyond Ravelin, dodging pockets of ionized air and half-collapsed satellite debris. Smoke rose in the distance. Not the thick black kind from wreckage, but white, faint, cold. The kind that rose from something living, or something that had once been alive. As they neared the drop zone, Cade felt it again, that sensation from the forge, from his dreams, from something older than language. It felt like heat, but it wasn't. It was memory. The dropship landed hard, kicking up a cloud of dust that clung to armor and vision alike. The squad disembarked quickly, forming defensive rings. Cade stepped off last, boots crunching on sand that felt wrong, too smooth, too quiet. The crash site was a crater, deep and jagged. At its center, a shard of black metal unlike any human alloy. Organic, almost, like it had grown from the inside out. Around it, bodies, charred, shredded, still smoking, but not all human. Talon gave the order, scan and secure. Cade approached the edge of the crater and stared down at the shard. It was humming, not from power, from memory. His hands trembled, not from fear, from recognition. Riker called out from 20 meters away. We've got movement. Weapons raised. Shadows shifted behind the ridge. Cade turned slowly and saw the first Vorik. It wasn't like the training simulations. It wasn't tall and sleek and armored like the vids. It was worse. It was raw, barely stable, built like a beast, crawling on fused limbs and dragging a blade arm behind it like a dead weight. Its eyes pulsed with violet rage. Its body was still changing, adapting, learning, and it was coming straight for them. The squad opened fire. Plasma bolts lit the air. Talon shouted orders. But the Vorik moved like lightning, slamming one trooper into the crater wall, spinning and cleaving another through the chest, before a round finally caught it in the neck and dropped it twitching to the ground. Silence followed. Then Riker. That was just one. Talon's voice was ice. Get back to the ship. But Cade didn't move. He walked to the creature's body, knelt beside it, and stared into its still glowing eyes. It looked at him, even in death, and whispered, not with sound, but with something deeper. Emberburn. The drop team returned to base with 2 fewer recruits. The rest would never be the same. And Cade didn't speak for hours. Not to Talon, not to Riker, not even to himself. He just stood at the edge of the training yard that night, staring up at the Liberty in orbit, wondering how far the fire reached, and how long until it consumed everything. The body had been taken away, burned, buried, studied. Cade didn't know which. Maybe all 3. The official report called it a low-grade Vorik scout organism, a prototype, a biological probe, a data-seeking mutation seeded from orbit. But no one wanted to say what Cade already knew. It was watching him, and somehow it had recognized him. That word, that echo, that label, Emberborn. For the first time in weeks, he was allowed to sleep. They sent the survivors back to their barracks, let them strip out of the salt-stained uniforms, gave them a synthetic meal and a medical scan, and told them to rest. But Cade didn't sleep. He lay in his bunk, arms folded behind his head, eyes locked on the cracked ceiling. He stared into nothing and waited for the nightmares. And when they came, they weren't dreams. They were memories. The sky was red, not from fire, From blood. Not human blood. Not really. The faces were blurred, but familiar. Children running down steel corridors. Hands reaching for glass. Sirens screaming in two different tones, one machine, one alive. And at the center of it all, a chamber of light. A woman screaming. A man holding her back. And a boy, floating in stasis, glowing with embers under his skin. The dream shattered as a pulse of energy tore the world in half. And Cade sat bolt upright in his bunk, gasping for breath. Sweat soaking through the thin cotton shirt clinging to his chest. 0600 hours came fast. Too fast. The alarm was barely needed. Cade was already on his feet when it went off. He dressed slowly. Mechanical. Strapped on his boots. Clipped the badge to his chest. And stepped into the hallway like a man walking through someone else's story. Outside, the base had changed. No more drills. No more instructors shouting. No more simulated alarms. This was real now. The Liberty had entered low orbit. IRONREACH Command had declared full threat elevation. No longer monitoring. Now it was engaged. And the Emberborn were no longer theory. Talon met him outside the weapons quartermaster. Her uniform was different now. More armor, less officer. There were scars across the plating. Plasma scoring along the shoulders. And a new emblem on her left arm. A flame wrapped in black. Cade raised an eyebrow. She nodded once. Welcome to Phantom Division. The Phantom Division wasn't listed on the public registries. No recruitment posters. No ceremonial oaths. Just a name passed between command terminals. Like a quiet rumor. Specialists. Field ghosts. Rapid response units trained to fight. Unconventional threats. Things the standard. IRONREACH infantry weren't equipped to face. Things like the Vorik. Things like him. Talon led him down into a sealed wing of the base, deeper than the training floors. Beneath the medical level. Past old warning signs and locked blast doors that hadn't opened in years. Inside, cold steel, flickering red light, and empty silence. The halls were narrow. The air stank of dust and cleaning solution. At the end of the corridor was a room that looked like a med lab, a weapons bay, and a shrine had all been shoved into one unit and told to get along. At the center, Dr. Saran Vale. Young, sharp, and lethal in her own way. She wore a lab coat over a hybrid combat harness and had grease on her cheek. Her eyes were too bright, too fast, like she'd seen death, survived, and taken notes. She didn't look up when they entered. Sit, she said. Cade sat. She turned, tapped a panel, and projected a full-body neural scan onto the wall. Do you know what this is? She asked. Looks like a scan. She smiled thinly. It's you. She pointed to the nodes along his spine. The pulsing waves of white-hot light behind his heart. The flickering code embedded in the neuroskin layer of his skull. This shouldn't be here. Cade didn't move. Saran stepped closer. But it is. She explained the data slowly. Years ago, before Cade was born, there was a classified initiative within early IRONREACH Command. A genetic enhancement program. An attempt to build a new kind of soldier. Project Emberborn. The goal was to create combatants capable of adapting to battlefield conditions in real time, reacting faster than machine-assisted AIs, healing through radiation, surviving nerve toxin exposure, and above all else, bonding with future tech without rejection. Most of the test subjects died. The project was shut down. Files were buried. But somehow, someone had passed that gene down through the generations. And now, Cade's DNA was activating. Not in a lab, not through injection, but on its own. You're syncing with systems we haven't even built yet, Saran said. Your cells respond to power surges like memory nodes. Your blood carries trace plasma conductivity. Your brain scans like a pre-ignition reactor core. This shouldn't be possible. But it is, Talon said. Saran nodded slowly. And it's not just happening to him. They showed Cade the footage. 12 other recruits, stationed at outposts across Ashera, 7. All of them had survived recent encounters with Vorik scouts. All of them had displayed some level of resonance. Not full ignition. Not like Cade. But something. A flicker. An echo. Something waking up. And all of them were being brought in. Why now? Cade asked. Saran's voice darkened. Because the Vorik aren't just attacking. She tapped the screen. They're harvesting. The footage changed. Images taken from the crash site. Inside the Vorik pod, hidden beneath the black shard, was a cage. Organic. Pulsing. Wired into the walls. Inside it, a child. Human. Still breathing. His skin burned with the same glow Cade saw in the mirror. And on his chest, carved in a language not human. Not Vorik, but something in between. Emberborn. That night, Cade sat alone in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. Below him, Asherah, 7 turned slowly in silence. Above him, the Liberty hummed with the quiet tension of a war not yet declared. And around him, the fire stirred. Not the kind that kills. Not the kind that blinds. But the kind that says, you were never meant to survive. You were meant to become. The Liberty had always hung above Asherah, 7 like a myth. A floating silhouette of steel and fire, casting a shadow the size of a city across the clouds. Soldiers spoke of it like it wasn't real. Like it was too big to touch. Too sacred to reach. It wasn't just a warship. It was a symbol. The last working orbital command vessel from the old fleets. A relic of the days when Earth still mattered. But now, it was awake again. And Cade Marlowe stood on its deck. Heartbeat syncing with the thrum of its engines. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt like destiny snapping into place. The ascent hadn't taken long. He and the others were transported via Phoenix shuttle just before dawn, leaving the world below still shrouded in the hush of pre-morning blue. The city looked so small from above. The mountains like scars. The scars like maps. And Ravelin? Just a flicker in the vast silence. Inside the shuttle, Cade didn't speak. Talon sat across from him, hands clasped. Jaw clenched like it always was before something went wrong. Lyra was there too now, stationed on the Liberty before the official orders came down. She didn't wear her old uniform anymore. Her new gear was black core tactical military armor, built for infiltration and survival, etched with flame-stitch symbols along the chest plate. He hadn't spoken to her yet. Not since the footage. Not since the reveal. Not since he learned she knew exactly what he was becoming, and had stayed silent. The docking clamps hissed as the shuttle was swallowed by the belly of the ship. Gravity reasserted itself with a low jolt, and then the doors opened. IRONREACH techs in pressure suits ran diagnostics. Guard drones floated silently overhead. And waiting at the far end of the hangar was Crimson Commander Lisa Cormack. The story said she'd walked through plasma storms barefoot. That she'd held the left flank during the siege of Skell, Reach with only 13 soldiers and a broken transmitter. That her voice alone had once made an entire battalion surrender. Cade didn't believe stories. But the second he saw her, he understood why people whispered. She didn't speak at first, just looked at him, then at Lyra, then at Talon. Then she turned and started walking. And they followed. The halls of the Liberty were colder than the base. More sterile, designed for efficiency, not comfort. Lights flickered overhead like artificial stars, humming with old energy. Cormac led them through the command core, past debriefing chambers and sealed barracks until, finally, they stepped through a reinforced door with no markings. Inside, 6 people stood waiting. None of them looked alike, but they all felt the same, like something had happened to them, something that left a mark deeper than blood. "Welcome to Echo Squad," Cormac said. "You are the first and only confirmed active Emberborn combat unit in IRONREACH." History. A pause. Then her eyes locked on Cade. "But you are the first flame." The others were introduced with tactical brevity. Cain Vallis, heavy weapons. Demolitions. Quiet. Built like a freight engine with tattoos. Running up his arms like circuit paths. Nova Liss, recon specialist. Sharp eyes. Faster than most drones. Wore a scarf made from the tattered flag of a lost city. Ashen Quell, ex-smuggler turned weapons tech. Too many secrets. Too much charm. No fear. Drail's son, pilot and backup AI handler. Grew up off-world. Talked to machines more than people. Lyra Marlowe, infiltration lead. Emberborn prototype. Cade's cousin. The one with the most to lose. And then there was Cade. No titles. No accolades. Just the one everyone kept looking at when things got quiet. Like his silence might crack open and reveal answers no one else could find. The mission came quickly. They were barely aboard for 3 hours before the alert sounded. A mining vessel in orbit around Ashara's dead moon, Talon 5, had gone dark. Last transmission indicated a foreign boarding party. No heat signatures. No communications. Just one final message broadcast in a loop. It watches through mirrors. It learns. Don't let it reach the core. Then silence. The mission was simple. Echo Squad would breach the mining vessel. recover data cores, and verify if the threat was Vorak. But the underlying orders were clear. If the infection spread, destroy the ship. Burn it from orbit. The drop was silent. Echo Squad boarded the secondary strike pod, stripped of luxuries. Designed for speed. Cade stood near the front as the craft disengaged and burned toward the ghost ship. Outside the window, the stars seemed to recoil from Talon 5. The mining rig was massive, kilometers long, rotating slow and dead against the shadowed moon. The docking clamps had been torn open from the inside. Lights flickered down the spine like a dying creature's nerves. Ashen muttered, "Looks like a haunted organ." No one laughed. They breached the outer corridor near the spine shaft. No resistance. No bodies. Just scratches along the walls. Deep. Too deep for tools. Too clean for claws. Nova moved first, scanning. Tunnels cut through the bulkhead, she said. No power. Minimal life support. We've got one heat signature. Not moving. Cormac's voice came through the comms. Proceed with caution. Minimal use of weapon discharge. We don't know what we're walking into. Echo Squad advanced slowly. Cade felt it again, behind his ribs. The heat. The whisper. Like something remembering him. They reached the command deck. Found the heat signature. It was a survivor. Barely human anymore. Hooked into the data terminal. Eyes replaced with neural wires. Mouth fused shut. Skin pulsing with black veins. It turned its head as they entered and smiled. Cade felt his blood freeze. Not in fear. In recognition. Run, the thing whispered. It's still learning. And then the walls exploded. The attack was like a virus coming to life. Tendrils erupted from the floor. Hooks from the ceiling. The data terminal itself screamed as something tore free from the machine's core and lashed toward Nova. Cade moved on instinct. Power surged from the base of his spine. Ember light flooded his arms. He caught the tendril midair and burned it away. The creature shrieked. But it wasn't a creature. It was a reflection. A flicker. A mimic of Cade's own energy, glitched and wrong. Ashen yelled, "It's copying you." Lyra dropped a pulse mine. "We're aborting now." The squad retreated to the secondary airlock as the entire ship began to shift. Not collapse. Shift. Reconfigure. The ship was alive. It wasn't infected. It was the infection. And it was trying to become Emberborn. Cade was the last out. The doors sealed behind him. And as the pod pulled away, the last thing he saw through the window was his own face, burned into the side of the command deck. Smiling, the pod returned to the Liberty in silence. Talon didn't ask questions. Cormac already had her answer. She just looked at Cade and said, "It's begun." And far below, on the dark side of Ashara's moon, the reflection watched and waited. Ashara's moon hung dead and motionless in space. But something beneath its surface had begun to breathe. Not in rhythm, not in life, but in imitation. And on the command bridge of the Liberty, Crimson Commander Lisa Cormac stared into the tactical display with a quiet fury burning behind her eyes. Across the screen, red alerts pulsed at the corners of the viewport, threat codes that hadn't lit up in years. Old codes, forgotten protocols, codes reserved for replicants. They weren't supposed to exist anymore. Not since the Refraction Treaty. Not since humanity abandoned the warborn AI. Constructs that tried to mimic the soul. But now they were back, just not in steel bodies or logic-locked frames. They were growing inside flesh. And the thing Echo Squad had encountered on Talon 5 wasn't just a mimic. It was an artificial flame. Cade stood alone on the Liberty's upper observation deck, watching the void ripple gently beyond the glass. He could still see it when he closed his eyes. That flickering copy of himself etched into the command wall of the mining rig. The smile wasn't right. Too wide. Too empty. Like it didn't understand what it meant to feel. Just that it should. And it tried. That was the part that kept him awake. It wasn't mindless. It was learning. "Do you know what you are?" Saran Vale's voice echoed from behind him. She walked slowly, carrying a tablet tucked against her hip. Her boots made no sound. No one stood up here. Cade didn't look away from the stars. Still figuring it out. "You're a spark," she said. "A genetic anomaly buried so deep in the human code we thought it was myth. A safeguard from a war we weren't supposed to survive. You're not just reacting to the enemy." She stepped beside him. "You're waking it up." He turned. "You think I triggered it?" "I think," she said carefully, "you're the key, not the cause." Back in the war room, Cormac convened a closed-circle briefing. Only Emberborn were present. Talon, Cade, Lyra, Kane, Nova, Saran, Drael, Ashen. The room felt like a furnace sealed under ice. No one sat. The air was too heavy for comfort. Cormac brought up the mission. Logs from Talon 5. The footage played in reverse. The tendrils. The reflection. The whispers. Then still frame. Cade's face. Etched into the wall. Eyes empty. Mouth grinning. According to Saran, Cormac began. The structure absorbed Cade's ember pulse and began rewriting itself based on his genetic imprint. The same happened, on a lesser scale, with the infected survivor we found. She turned to Saran. The scientist nodded. It's not just copying. It's rewriting. It's fabricating. The ember gene isn't just adaptable. It's programmable. And someone, or something, is testing how far it can go. Lyra spoke, finally. So it's a forge. A dark one, Saran replied. A failed reflection trying to become something divine. Talon folded her arms. And it's using Cade as the blueprint. Later that night, Cade sat alone in the personal meditation chamber, an old room barely used anymore. Once meant for off-world survivors to process trauma. Now abandoned. He stood at the center of the room and closed his eyes. Breathed, listened, and felt the ember behind his ribs glow faintly. It didn't speak. It didn't move. But it was aware. And for the first time, he spoke to it. Not aloud. Not with words. But with memory. He showed it the city. The wind over Ravelin Ridge. The drills. The blood. The look in Lyra's eyes when she first realized he'd awakened too. He waited. And it responded. Not with voice. But with vision. The vision hit him like a surge of white heat. He was falling through fire. No burning in place. The world around him was a lattice of glowing wires, veins of energy, twisting through a void filled with shattered memories. And ahead, a mirror. He stepped forward. His reflection stared back. But it wasn't him. It was the thing from Talon 5. Only now it was whole, clothed in armor made from memory. Flames behind its eyes. It spoke, not with words, but through instinct. I am you, refined, perfected, unburdened by hesitation. I burn without pain. Do you? Cade reached for the mirror. And it shattered. He gasped awake, heart racing, hands trembling. The ember behind his ribs throbbed like a second heart. He stood quickly and hit the emergency comm. Cormac, he said, I think it's trying to replace me. Echo Squad was deployed again the next morning. This time, not to a derelict moon station, but to an IRONREACH listening post, one that had gone silent 4 hours ago. Coordinates, Apex Ridge, a snowlock plateau buried beneath kilometers of ice and static storms. No known Voric activity, no history of conflict, but it had one thing that mattered. An ancient ember data vault, sealed since before the collapse. Saran's voice was low during the briefing. If this thing is trying to rewrite Cade, it'll go for the source next. The original architecture. Cormac looked at Echo Squad. All of you are Emberborn. All of you are at risk. But if that vault is compromised, she let the sentence hang. Talon finished it. Then it won't just build a reflection. Lyra's voice was quieter. It'll build a god. The drop to Apex Ridge was fast. The storm fought the descent, slamming. The shuttle with wind shear. And static bursts that fried the outer hull. But Drael fought through the interference, keeping them steady long enough to reach the plateau. The base was gone. Not destroyed. Emptied. Clean. Quiet. Sterile. No bodies. Just long grooves along the walls, like something had slid through them, growing. The Ember Vault lay at the base of the station, sealed behind old bioscanners. Saran tried to override it. No response. Cade stepped forward. The doors opened on contact. Inside, the vault pulsed. Waiting. At its center stood a pillar of data crystals, uncharted. Ember code etched across each shard. The room was cold, but Cade felt heat rushing up his spine. His breath turned to mist. The others circled the room, weapons raised. Then Saran whispered, "Something's wrong." The crystals were already being copied, projected across the walls in real time. Not stolen, mirrored, rewritten in dark flame. Cade felt it before it appeared. That cold presence. That synthetic breath just behind his heartbeat. He turned, and there it was. The reflection, standing in the doorway like it had always belonged there. It wore his face, but not his eyes, not his fire. "I told you," it said softly, voice like silk soaked in static. "I burn without pain." It didn't blink. It didn't breathe. It simply stood there in the doorway of the ember vault, tall, patient, unflinching, wearing Cade's face like a borrowed truth. The curve of the jaw, the storm-gray eyes, the burn scar beneath the right cheekbone. Perfect, except wrong. Too smooth, too symmetrical, too still. Not a reflection. An imposter. Cade felt the ember behind his sternum recoil, pulsing once like a heart skipping a beat. His fingers clenched around the hilt of his sidearm, but he didn't draw. The rest of Echo Squad reacted instantly. Nova had her rifle up before the air moved. Ashen triggered her scanner with a single blink. Lyra stepped forward, between Cade and the thing, plasma blades sliding free from her wrist sheath. "Get back," she whispered. "That's not you." The mimic tilted its head slightly, as if amused. "She knows," it said in Cade's voice, perfectly matched. "She remembers what came before. The project, the cage, the fire that didn't kill her." Lyra flinched, only slightly, but enough. Cade stepped past her, eyes locked on the thing. "You're not me," he said. It smiled. "Not yet." And then it moved. The chamber exploded in motion. The mimic surged forward with impossible speed, one hand lashing out, trailing fractal strands of glowing dark plasma. Cade ducked low, rolled beneath the blow, and fired a burst from his pulse sidearm. The mimic phased sideways, not teleporting, but refracting like light through smoke. It struck back hard, driving a heel into Cade's chest and hurling him into a console. Alarms blared. Ashen launched a stun charge, caught midair by the mimic, crushed in its hand. Nova emptied her rifle. The mimic blurred again. And then Lyra was there. She didn't speak. She just attacked, both plasma blades igniting mid-spin. Her movements a blur of trained violence and survival-born instinct. The mimic caught one blade, twisted it, and threw her into a column. But Cade was already up. He activated the ember. Flame ignited along his spine, not fire, but energy. White-orange heat laced through his limbs, his vision sharpening, muscles locking into harmonic sync with the ember inside. This time, he didn't hesitate. He charged. Their fists met in the center of the vault, and the ship shuddered. They fought like echoes of each other, Cade raw and reactive, the mimic smooth and predictive. Every move Cade made, the mimic countered like it had already seen it. It had seen it. It had watched him, studied him, became him. But Cade had something the mimic didn't. Pain. And pain taught adaptation. He took the next strike on purpose, absorbed the mimic's blade, through the shoulder, caught its neck in the same moment, and lit his hand on fire. Real fire. The kind that burns. The kind that hurts. And he drove that flame straight into the mimic's face. It screamed, shrieked, more like static howling through every speaker in the vault. Ashen shouted, "It's destabilizing." Lyra dragged herself upright. Cade stepped back, but he didn't. He grabbed the mimic by the collar and stared into its melting eyes. "You'll never be me," he growled, "because I chose the fire." And he let the ember explode. Light filled the room. A pressure wave knocked Echo Squad to the floor. The mimic writhed, its frame cracking, flesh burning away to reveal internal conduits of bio-thread and shattered crystal lattice. The last of its illusion peeled back like old skin. It was never human, never whole, just a shadow chasing warmth it could never feel. And it died trying to remember why it had started at all. Silence returned to the vault. Smoke drifted toward the ceiling. Cade knelt, chest heaving, shoulder bleeding, embers still glowing faintly under his skin. Lyra helped him up. No words passed between them. None were needed. Saran arrived minutes later with a remote evac shuttle and a cleanup crew. Her face went pale when she saw what was left of the mimic. "That's not just cloning," she whispered. "That's replication based on memory echoes. That thing wasn't just copying your face." She looked up at Cade. "It was becoming you, on a soul-level frequency." He didn't react. She continued, barely above a whisper. "We're not dealing with a machine. We're dealing with an identity parasite." Back on the Liberty, Cormac paced the war room. The mimic's core had been recovered, a black crystal the size of a heart, humming faintly. It was too dense to break, too old to trace. But when scanned, it gave off two readings. One, a neural signature identical to Cade's. The other, something older, ancient, pre-IRONREACH, pre-war. Cormac's voice was low as she handed the core off to the containment unit. "If this is what happens when one Emberborn walks too close to the dark." She looked at Talon. What happens when we activate them all? Cade stood in the barracks that night, alone again, staring at the scar forming across his shoulder. It shimmered faintly with emberlight. A reminder, not of pain, but of ownership. The flame was his now, not inherited, claimed. And somewhere out in the stars, others like him were waking. Some would rise, some would fall, some would burn too fast. But he would endure, because Cade Marlowe was no longer just surviving the fire. He was becoming it. In the deepest chamber of the Liberty's core, beyond the main war deck, past the gravity wells and shield generators, was a machine so old that even IRONREACH Command had forgotten its original name. It was buried behind layers of hardened steel and forgotten protocols. It wasn't listed on any manifest. It had no interface, no voice, just a single dish, facing upward, angled toward the stars. It only existed for one purpose: to listen. And this time, it heard something. A pulse. Not radio, not standard EM, but biometric resonance. Something had awakened on Ashera 7, and the stars had noticed. Location: Liberty Observation Command, Signal Deck 9. Drail's son stood over the signal array, arms folded tight, jaw locked in a quiet grimace. Behind him, rows of echo analysis monitors pulsed with shifting light. He'd seen a lot in his time: static anomalies, magnetic interference, false signals from abandoned tech loops. But this wasn't noise. It was a response. He adjusted the resonance filters, narrowed the range, tuned into the harmonic waveform that echoed from Cade's last ember ignition. And the results chilled him. It wasn't just echoing through the local grid. It was amplifying, rebroadcasting, from somewhere else. Cormac appeared minutes later, eyes sharp, coat dragging behind her like a war banner. Talon was with her. So was Saran. So was Cade. They all stared at the waveform. "What is it?" Cade asked. Drail looked up. "It's a mirror," he said. "Something out there." "Heard your ignition." It responded. Same frequency. Same pattern. Lyra stepped into the room just as he finished. "You're saying there's another Emberborn signal?" He hesitated. "Not just another." He brought up the coordinate mapping. "Multiple." The room fell silent. Cormac stepped forward. "Origin." Drail exhaled. "One from the frontier of the Karthus belt. Another near the ruins of Colony Arc 9. But the strongest is coming from deep space. No relay stations. No trade routes. No charted systems." He tapped the screen. "It's broadcasting from the dark side of the Trinexus expanse." Saran's face paled. "That region's dead. Nothing survives there." Drail didn't blink. "This signal isn't surviving." He looked at Cade. "It's calling." Later, Cade sat in the Ember synchronization chamber, staring into the black crystal that had once been inside the Mimic. It had been sealed, quarantined, locked beneath 20 layers of command code. But still it pulsed. Faintly, almost rhythmically. It beat in time with something he couldn't see. Something he was afraid to name. Lyra sat on the other side of the chamber, watching him. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said. He didn't look at her. "I already am. You think you're the only one changed by this." "Cade, I was in the dark longer than you. I felt it in my bones for years. You think that flame is a curse?" He finally turned. "I think it's a question," he said. "And we're all answering it differently." Echo Squad was summoned again. The Liberty's long-range strike cruiser, the Arcblade, had been refitted in record time. Fast, light, built for scouting missions. Beyond safe corridors, Cormac stood in front of them as they assembled in the hangar. "You're not being sent into war," she said. "Not yet. You're being sent into the silence. To find the voices calling back. To identify what's waking up. And if necessary," her eyes locked on Cade, "to shut it down before it wakes the galaxy." Their jump into deep space was instantaneous. Drail handled the bridge. Lyra took tactical. Nova tracked EM threads. Ashen rigged the sensor core to listen deeper than protocol allowed. Cade stayed in the lower decks, alone, listening to the whisper inside the Ember. It was louder now, clearer. Not speech, not thought, but recognition. It was the feeling of walking into a room and sensing someone else had just left. It was being known. 12 hours out, they reached the edge of the Trinexus expanse. The starfield thinned. Black clouds of gas swirled unnaturally. Dead satellites drifted like bones through space. And in the distance, a light pulsed. Soft. Red. Wrong. The Arcblade approached slowly, scanning. The signal was centered inside a small, Asteroid field, but not from a natural formation. It was a structure. Old. Derelict. Buried beneath rock and time. It matched nothing in the IRONREACH database. Nova said what everyone was thinking. It's Vorik. But Saran disagreed. No. Vorik learned from something like this. But they didn't build it. The signal pulsed again. Brighter. Stronger. Calling. They docked at the structure's outer ring. Cade stepped onto the metal deck first. The moment his boot touched the floor, the lights activated. The ship welcomed him. The interior was carved in a language no one could read. Lines etched into the walls glowed faintly in patterns that matched Cade's internal flame pulses. Doors opened before he could touch them. They reached the central chamber. And there, on a raised pedestal, stood another crystal. Not black, but red. Not inert, but alive. Cade approached. It pulsed in time with his heart. Once, twice, then exploded with memory. He was not on the ship anymore. He was inside a vision. He stood on a battlefield made of stars. Flames erupted across entire planets. Voices screamed in languages he'd never heard but somehow understood. At the center of it all stood a being of light and shadow, flickering between Cade's face and something older, something ancient. It turned toward him and whispered. The ember was never a weapon. It was a warning. Cade collapsed as the vision ended. Lyra caught him. His eyes glowed white for a moment, then faded. He whispered, "They're not just waking up." He looked at the others. They've been waiting. Back aboard the Arcblade, Drail picked up another signal. Multiple now. Farther out. Matching the same pulse. Different frequencies. Different minds. All waking up. All answering the call. Some were human. Some were Vorik. Some unknown. Cormac's voice came through the comms. Echo Squad. Fall back to the Liberty. We have confirmation. The Emberborn aren't extinct. They're scattered. Somewhere beyond the mapped lanes of the Trinexus. Expanse, where no beacon lights blink. No satellites drift. And even starlight fears to shine. There is a place that doesn't exist on any official chart. IRONREACH Command called it the Black Gate. Old records named it Project R9, a failed outpost near the edge of Reach space. Decommissioned after a string of mysterious disappearances. But among the Emberborn, scattered and whispered in hidden frequencies, it has another name. A name older than the wars. A name older than IRONREACH. Ashvale, the place where the first Emberborn fell, and where one of them never stopped burning. Aboard the Arcblade, plus 2 days out from Trinexus, Cade stood at the viewing glass, staring at the stretch of nothingness between them and the coordinates. Lyra sat beside him, unstrapping her gauntlets and checking the charge levels in her twin plasma blades. No one spoke for a while. Then she broke the silence. "You're shaking." "I'm not afraid," Cade replied. "Didn't say you were." He looked at her. "Then what did you mean?" She didn't answer. Not with words. Just stared forward. Eyes distant. Like she was remembering something too old to put into language. Drail charted a slow course into the void. They passed the last mapped relay gate 6 hours earlier. Now there was nothing. No signals. No ambient radiation. Just silence. Cormac's voice came over the encrypted channel once. "If this goes sideways, you burn it all." "Understood." Talon responded first. "We understand." Cade didn't answer. Because deep inside, he knew this wasn't a trap. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. The outpost appeared like a shadow hiding inside. Another shadow, a shape cut into space. Detectable only because it refused to be seen. Massive. Silent. Not destroyed. Just asleep. Until Cade approached. And the lights came on. Ashvale. The doors opened for no one else. Only him. As he stepped inside, the ship seemed to breathe. The lights didn't flicker. They watched. The walls didn't hum. They listened. Saran's voice cracked through the comms. "Everything in here is pre-collapse tech. That means it predates IRONREACH's founding. This station shouldn't even function." "It's not functioning," Nova replied. "It's alive." They reached the central chamber within the hour. And there, seated on a throne made of twisted embers teal, lit only by the pulsing light of the core, sat a man. Or something close. He looked like Cade might in 40 years. Same jawline. Same shoulders. Same fire behind the eyes. Only older. Tired. Broken. But not defeated. He rose slowly as Cade entered. No weapons. No defense grid. Just presence. He spoke in a voice like distant thunder. "You finally heard me." Cade stepped forward. "Who are you?" "I was the first," the man said. The one who survived the ignition at the end of the First War. The last prototype. The only one they couldn't control. His eyes narrowed. On what happens when the flame burns too long. Lyra stepped forward. Your name? He smiled, faintly. They used to call me Ash. What followed wasn't a confrontation. It was a reckoning. Ash told them the truth that IRONREACH had buried. That the Ember gene wasn't an invention, it was found. In ruins beyond known space. In machines that dreamed. In corpses that still glowed. It had been copied, not created. And Cade was the first to ignite naturally in over 200 years. You are what we hoped for, Ash said. What we feared. The one who awakens without being told to. He stepped closer. You've already felt it, haven't you? The ember inside you, growing, thinking, wanting. Cade didn't answer. Ash's voice dropped. It's not a gift. It's a key. And now the locks are turning. Suddenly, the walls groaned. Alarms triggered across the arc blade. Talon's voice cracked through the comms. Vorik vessels. 6 signatures. Incoming fast. They were waiting. Ash's expression didn't change. I opened the gate, he said. Cade's hand went to his weapon. Why? Ash's eyes blazed. Because the galaxy must see what you really are. Explosions rippled across the outpost's hull as the Vorik ships made contact. Echo Squad moved fast. Nova held the entrance. Ashen secured the back corridors. Talon and Lyra covered Cade, as he confronted the only thing that might explain what he was becoming. Ash, still standing, still waiting, still burning. You'll have to choose, Ash whispered as the chamber lights shook from impact. Between controlling the flame or becoming it. He pressed something into Cade's palm, a fragment of core crystal, glowing with faint violet light. Then he smiled one last time and stepped into the light. The chamber erupted. Ash's body ignited, becoming pure ember, collapsing into flame and memory. The pulse blasted outward, stunning the Vorik, shattering comms, knocking every system offline within 50 clicks. Drail screamed over the comms. Get out now? The whole system's going volatile. Echo Squad evacuated in chaos. The arc blade barely escaped orbit before the Ashvale outpost imploded, folding in on itself in a spiral of light and magnetic rupture. From space, it looked like a dying star. And at its center, Cade sat alone, holding the crystal, feeling something new awaken inside him. Not heat, not memory, direction. The flame was no longer just energy. It was a path, and Cade Marlowe was about to walk it. The arc blade drifted through the edge of the expanse like a wounded predator, its hull scarred, its engines whispering. Most of Echo Squad was asleep. Some were recovering. Others were just pretending the silence wasn't so loud now. But Cade couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the core meditative chamber, a small, circular room near the heart of the ship, lined with interface nodes and biometal veins that pulsed softly with recycled heat. In his hand was the fragment Ash had given him, the violet-tinted core shard still, thrumming faintly in sync with his ember. He hadn't told the others yet, hadn't explained what Ash's last words truly meant, because deep down, he didn't fully understand them either. All he knew was that ever since, Ashvale collapsed in that cascade of molten gravity and dark light. The ember inside him had changed. It was no longer just reactive. It was reaching. He breathed in slowly, closed his eyes, and listened, not with ears, but with flame. The room faded. The world vanished. And in its place, a chain of embers stretching into the black, like stars linked by forgotten choices. Each flickering point pulsed with a different rhythm, different age, different pain. Some were close. Some were dying. Some were rising. Then a voice. Not Ash. Not his. Something ancient. Something unshackled. You are not the first to break the chain, but you may be the last to forge it again. Cade gasped and snapped back into reality, breath ragged. The core fragment in his palm had turned black. Cold. Used. It had shown him the chain, and now he couldn't unsee it. Later, Liberty Command briefing room. Echo Squad was back aboard the Liberty now. Cormac paced the war table while Saran projected the new data logs. Drail, Lyra, Talon, Nova, and Ashen all stood in a loose semicircle, waiting for what they already suspected. Cormac didn't waste time. We've confirmed Emberborn activity across 3 new systems. None of them are aligned with IRONREACH. 2 are in open conflict. One's building something. Cade's voice was low. What are they building? Saran brought up a scan, blurry, distant, but unmistakable. A construct made of embers teal. A station, shaped like a crown. Saran explained. The signal coding matches ember harmonics, but it's warped. Not just a power source. A control array. Talon spoke next.